23 hours a day, one man, one concrete cell at Idaho's only maximum security prison, a facility ranked among the 15 worst in America alongside Attica, San Quentin, and ADX Florence, where death row inmates take turns screaming threats through his air vents around the clock. Bryan Kohberger avoided the death penalty. What he got instead? Multiple legal scholars, a Yale Law Journal analysis, and the United Nations itself argue that what is happening to him right now may actually be worse. Not because of the sentence, not because of the 4 consecutive life terms, because of what permanent solitary confinement does to the human mind, year after year, in a facility where inmates organize hunger strikes over feces-covered recreation cages, where the National Alliance on Mental Illness has called mental health care inadequate, and where the man who murdered 4 sleeping college students has already started threatening to harm himself. This is what is confirmed, what changed, and what nobody saw coming inside Kohberger's prison nightmare. Stay to the end, because the final piece reframes everything you think you know about justice. It starts with a question no one has answered. Why? On November 13, 2022, between approximately 4:07 and 4:20 in the morning, 4 University of Idaho students were fatally stabbed at their off-campus rental house at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. Madison Mogen, age 21. Kaylee Gonkalves, age 21. Xana Kernodle, age 20. Ethan Chapin, age 20. They were stabbed a combined 150 times. Kernodle alone suffered over 50 stab wounds. 2 surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke, were in the house and were not attacked. The weapon was a Ka-Bar-style knife. It was never recovered. Bryan Christopher Kohberger was 28 years old, a criminology PhD student at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington, 9 miles from Moscow. He had no prior criminal record. He had no known connection to any of the 4 victims. None. Let's run the evidence dominoes. Kohberger's AT&T phone had connected to cell towers near the King Road house 23 times between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., starting in July 2022, more than 4 months before the killings. He had been circling. But on the night that matters, his phone went dark at approximately 2:54 a.m. It did not come back on until 4:48 a.m., covering the entire murder window. When it reactivated, the phone traced a circuitous route through Genesee, Idaho, to Uniontown, Washington, then north to Pullman, avoiding major roads. Between 9:12 and 9:21 a.m. that same morning, Kohberger's phone pinged back at the King Road area. He returned. 2 days before the murders, he had switched his phone off Wi-Fi to avoid digital tracking. Surveillance cameras captured a white sedan with no front plate, circling the neighborhood 4 times between roughly 3:30 and 4:20 a.m. At approximately 4:20 a.m., it sped away. Prosecutor Thompson later said it was going so fast the car almost lost control as it made the corner. The FBI identified it as a 2014 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra. Kohberger owned a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra. A WSU police officer matched the car on November 28th, noting it now had Washington plates, switched from Pennsylvania plates on November 18th, 5 days after the murders. By the time investigators searched it, the vehicle had been essentially disassembled inside. Spotless, meticulously cleaned. But one thing cannot be cleaned away. Ka-Bar leather knife sheath was found on the bed next to Madison Mogen's body. The Idaho State Police Forensic Lab recovered a single-source male DNA profile from the button snap, touch DNA, skin cells shed while handling the sheath. Investigators sent the sample to Othram, a Houston-based lab, which generated a profile within 48 hours of receiving it, on Thanksgiving 2022. Using investigative genetic genealogy and public genealogical databases, the FBI built a family tree, pointing to a Pennsylvania family. On December 19, 2022, investigators had Kohberger's name. 8 days later, a trash pull outside his parents' home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, recovered a Q-tip containing his father's DNA, establishing a paternal link. On December 30, 2022, they arrested him at that same home. A cheek swab confirmed the match. The STR profile was 5.37 octillion times more likely to belong to Kohberger than to any random unrelated individual. One sheath, one snap button. That's all it took. Surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen was awake during the murders. She heard a male voice say, "It's okay, Kaylee, I'm here for you." And she heard crying. She opened her door and saw a figure dressed in all black, masked, with bushy eyebrows, approximately 6 feet tall, holding an object she initially perceived as a vacuum. She did not call 911 until approximately 11:58 a.m. The digital evidence made it worse. Recovered data showed Kohberger purchased a K-bar knife, sheath, and sharpener on Amazon in March 2022, 8 months before the murders. He ran data erasing software on his laptop 3 days after the killings, but he forgot to clear his Android phone. Forensic analysts recovered autofill search terms, including sleeping, passed out, voyeur, forced, raped, and drugged. On Christmas Day 2022, he downloaded information on more than 20 serial killers, including Danny Rolling, the Gainesville Ripper, who also used a K-bar knife. His apartment and office were scrubbed clean. He had only 18 contacts saved in his phone, with labels like "Girl I Ran With" and "Second Girl I Ran With." He took a selfie showing a thumbs up hours after the murders. Jail documents revealed he washed his hands dozens of times daily, spent up to an hour in the shower, stayed awake almost all night, paced his cell, and video chatted with his mother for hours. A neighboring inmate called him a weirdo, and through all of it, including the DNA, the phone data, the car, the searches, and the sheath, investigators found no connection between Kohberger and any victim. Motive remains unknown. Prosecutor Thompson said, "We do not have a motive." That question has never been answered. Now here's the twist. On June 25th, 2025, Judge Stephen Hippler rejected Kohberger's alternate perpetrator defense. Prosecutors added his sister Amanda to their 180-person witness list. The defense had lost motions on alibi, DNA suppression, and venue change, and options were collapsing. 5 days later, the plea deal was announced. On July 2, 2025, at the Ada County Courthouse in Boise, Kohberger pleaded guilty to all 5 counts, 1 count of felony burglary and 4 counts of first-degree murder. When Judge Hippler asked if he stabbed each victim deliberately with premeditation and malice aforethought, Kohberger answered yes for each. The death penalty was removed. He received 4 consecutive fixed life sentences without parole, plus 10 years for burglary. He waived his right to appeal. He agreed to pay restitution of approximately $28,956.88. No factual allocution was required. He was not compelled to explain what he did or why. Thompson said, "There is nothing that I believe that Mr. Kohberger could say that would shed the actual truth on what happened." The sentencing, on July 23, 2025, is where everything became real. Judge Hippler, visibly emotional and wiping away tears, called Kohberger a faceless coward who slithered through that sliding glass door the worst of the worst. He said, "Parents who took their children to college in a truck filled with moving boxes had to bring them home in hearses lined with coffins." He added he was unable to come up with anything redeeming about Mr. Kohberger, because his grotesque acts of evil have buried and hidden anything that might have been good or intrinsically human about him. He concluded, "It's time to end Mr. Kohberger's 15 minutes of fame." He imposed $50,000 in fines per count, $250,000 total, plus $5,000 in civil penalties to each victim's family. Kohberger, in an orange jumpsuit, showed no visible emotion. When offered the chance to speak, he said only, "I respectfully decline." Family members murmured, "Surprise, surprise," and "coward." The family statements hit different. Olivia Goncalves, Kaylee's sister, said, "If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, in the middle of the night like a pedophile, Kaylee would have kicked your fucking ass." The courtroom applauded. "You're a delusional, pathetic, hypochondriac loser. You spent months preparing and still all it took was my sister and a sheath." Steve Goncalves turned the podium to face Kohberger directly against courtroom instructions and said, "Today we are here to prove to the world that you picked the wrong families, wrong state, the wrong police officers, the wrong community." Christy Goncalves said, "You are officially the property of the state of Idaho, where your fellow inmates are anxiously awaiting your arrival. Hell will be waiting." Jeff Kernodle, Xana's father, said he was just 7 miles away that night but did not drive over because he had been drinking. "I really wish I would have gone, because they would have had a chance, all 4 of them." To Kohberger, he said, "You would have had to deal with me." Randy Davis, Xana's stepfather, shaking visibly, said, "Go to hell. You're evil. You took our children. You are gonna suffer, man." Kim Kernodle, Xana's aunt, said something no one expected. "Bryan, I am here today to tell you that I have forgiven you, because I can no longer live with that hate in my heart." Dylan Mortensen spoke publicly for the first time. "He took away my ability to trust the world around me. What he did shattered me in places I didn't know could break." She called Kohberger a hollow vessel, something less than human, a body without empathy, without remorse. The families were sharply divided. The Goncalves family was beyond furious. Steve Goncalves told News Nation, "Justice is when you leave the planet. Prison is nothing but adult childcare. You get free vision, free dental, free meals, air conditioning, room and board, cable television. It's ridiculous." The Chapin family accepted the deal. Stacy Chapin told Today, "We always felt like this was a better deal. He gets put away, and there's no appeal system to it." Xana's mother, Kara Northington, opposed the death penalty. "That's not who I am, but I do think that he should spend the rest of his days in prison." That same day, Kohberger was transferred to the Idaho Maximum Security Institution in Kuna, IDOC, inmate number 163214, 535 inmates behind double razor wire perimeter fencing. He was placed in J Block, permanent solitary confinement on the same block as Idaho's 8 death row inmates, including Chad Daybell and serial killer Thomas Creech. Former Idaho Attorney General David Leroy predicted he would be in solitary confinement for the rest of his life. This is where the story changes. 23 hours per day alone. 1 hour of outdoor recreation in a cement-walled courtyard. Showers every other day. All meals delivered through a slot in his cell door. Because he follows a vegan diet, his first dinner included barley casserole, baked beans, and canned fruit, while other inmates had hot dogs. Anytime he leaves his cell, belly chains and leg irons. He has commissary access through the J-Pay system, a tablet for music, email, and games, and a TV with basic cable. No internet, no conjugal visits. But the isolation is not the worst part. The inmates are. Retired Detective Chris McDonough said the inmates are literally getting up into the grate and yelling at him. The inmates are taking turns doing it. It is relentless. It is driving him crazy. IDOC responded that incarcerated individuals commonly communicate with each other in prison. On July 30th, 2025, one day after arriving, Kohberger filed a formal request to be transferred to B Block, citing minute-by-minute verbal threats and harassment. On August 4th, 2025, he filed a formal complaint. One inmate told him, "I'll you Another said the only we will be eating is Kohberger's. A guard confirmed hearing vulgar language but could not identify the inmates. The complaint was closed. Other inmates flooded their cells by clogging toilets, sending water into Kohberger's area. In mid-August, a leaked video from a ceiling-mounted security camera circulated online. IDOC confirmed it was authentic and in clear violation of policy. Defense attorney Ann Taylor emailed prison leadership with Reddit links to the footage. The responsible corrections officer was identified but not charged because the action did not violate state or federal law. By December 2025, it escalated. Kohberger had written staff messages stating he would harm himself if not moved from J-Block. McDonough noted he specifically says, "I am going to harm myself, not kill myself," which experts believe may be calculated to secure a transfer to the medical ward with more spacious cells. Staff responded by increasing cell checks and removing shoelaces, pencils, pens, and sharp instruments. Forensic psychologist Gary Brucato told CBS News that Kohberger is being robbed of that infamy, that attention, and that control as inmates mock rather than fear him. Investigative reporter Howard Blum said, "Murder is about control, and prison is the ultimate situation where you have no control." He is not responding well to that. Here is why experts say this may be worse than death. Judge Alex Kozinski wrote in the Yale Law Journal, "Taking prisoners off death row and putting them in supermax prisons may soothe our collective conscience, but we may be condemning those inmates to decades-long torture that may make a swift execution look like an act of grace." The United Nations Mandela Rules prohibit solitary beyond 15 consecutive days, classifying anything longer as torture. Kohberger has been in solitary since July 29, 2025. Over 7 months. No end in sight. Former United Nations Special Rapporteur Juan Mendez called for a global ban. His successor, Niels Meltzer, declared United States prolonged solitary amounts to psychological torture. Harvard psychiatrist Dr. Stuart Gracian first described SHU syndrome, a psychiatric condition caused by solitary that includes anxiety, psychosis, hallucinations, paranoia, and self-harm. University of California, Santa Cruz. Dr. Craig Haney documented individuals with no prior mental illness developing paranoid psychosis in isolation. A Cornell University study found even short stays in solitary were associated with 60% higher mortality and 78% higher suicide risk. Half of all prison suicides occur in isolation cells, despite solitary inmates comprising only 6 to 8% of the population. University of Chicago, Dr. Stephanie Cacioppo called solitary nothing less than a death penalty by social deprivation. The Death Penalty Information Center has documented 150 death row inmates who waived all appeals and chose death over continued incarceration. Inmate William Blake, after 25 years in solitary, wrote, "I cannot fathom how dying any death could be harder or more terrible than living through all that I have been forced to endure for the last quarter century." During the Boston Marathon bomber trial, Tsarnaev's own defense attorneys argued that life at ADX Florence is not a lesser sentence than death. It is a sentence other than death. Applied to Kohberger, he is 31 years old. He likely faces 50 or more years of this. Serial killer Keith Jesperson publicly suggested Kohberger would have been safer on death row. So here is where things stand. Bryan Kohberger is serving 4 consecutive life sentences without parole. His 42-day appeal window expired in September 2025 with no filing, and legal experts call any future appeal likely futile. A restitution hearing was held via Zoom on November 5, 2025. Judge Hippler's ruling is still pending. In January 2026, victims' families filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Washington State University. In February 2026, Idaho State Police released over 2,000 crime scene photos. No Eighth Amendment challenge has been filed. though a conditions of confinement claim under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983 remains theoretically available. The murder weapon has never been recovered. No motive has ever been established. Judge Hippler's sentencing words hang in the air. Kohberger is now consigned to the ignominy and isolation of perpetual incarceration. But one question remains, the one that started this, the one nobody, not investigators, not prosecutors, not Kohberger himself, has ever answered. A criminology PhD student with no connection to 4 sleeping college students drove past their house 23 times in 4 months, turned off his phone, and attacked them in the dark. Why? Authorities have not said. Kohberger has not said. We will follow updates.